Good morning. I'm Jamila Batchelder, the Director of Religious Education here. I am a 47-year-old white woman with dark blonde hair pulled up in a ponytail, glasses, and a green, white, and black geometric print wrap dress, and a chalice necklace. So, kids, I hope you listen to what I have to say today, because it's for you all too. It's something we're going to be talking about a lot this year. We're going to use a lot of big words. I'm going to try to describe what they mean. So, as Unitarian Universalists, we believe that new truth is always unfolding. New wisdom, new understanding, and new ways of communicating those truths and wisdoms and understandings. And as some of you know, each year, Unitarian Universalists from many congregations across the continent gather at a big event called General Assembly, where we share what we've been thinking about and talking together about and who we are, thinking about who we are and where we're going as UUs. And because we believe in the democratic process, we do a lot of voting. So raise your hand if you've ever been a voting delegate from this congregation. It's pretty fun to get to vote at GA. So this year was a big year for voting. We've been talking a lot over the last several years about our principles. While our church now has 8 principles, UUs as a whole only officially have 7, and I really like our principles. But here's the thing. How many of you can name all 8 of them off the top of your head? Raise your hand if you think you know. Raise your hand if you think you'd miss a few. No, I know them. I've had to teach them to kids long enough. But there's a lot of words in there. And maybe they're not the best way to communicate who we are and what we're doing. When I try to explain to people who we are as UUs, I always say we're not a creedal religion, but a covenantal one, which is just a fancy way to say we put relationships, not doctrine, at the center of our religion. Relationships with each other, with all human beings, with all living creatures, with the earth, perhaps with a higher power, and with ourselves. That is what it means to me to be a UU. How well we are at caring for these relationships. And we are covenanting, which means promising. We're covenanting to care for each other and to continue to figure out how to care for each other better. And we believe there are certain values that are essential to the creation of that covenant. So at General Assembly, we decided the best way to guide us as UUs was to center those values. We still will have our principles, but we will now put our values and the way they call us into covenant, these big promises we make as UUs, we're going to make that our focus. And then they had a vote, and now we have 7 values and 7 promises that I want to teach you about. So I've seen a lot of ways to talk about and teach these values, and this one is my favorite that I'm going to show you. So this is how I'm going to teach you and teach our kids this year. So the values have no official order. You see they're in a circle with love at the center. But I'm going to teach them to you with numbers so that it's easier to keep track. So for 1, I want you to raise up your index finger and let it uncurl like a little seedling uncurling a new shoot upwards. Our first value is transformation. Transformation means growth and change. So we as UUs promise to never think we have it all figured out. We will always be open to the possibility of growing, changing, transforming. So now 2. Hold up 2 fingers and turn them sideways so they look like an equal sign. Our second principle, our second value is equity. Equity means believing that everyone has inherent worth and should have the opportunity to thrive. So we as UUs promise to try to create communities that are inclusive, accessible, and where all are valued. Now hold up 3 fingers. And imagine 3 little finger people having a conversation with each other. 3 is for pluralism. Pluralism means the space for many ideas, where we aren't required to think all alike. We as UUs promise to try to foster dialogue and deep listening, deep sharing, voting, always trying to understand each other better and not expecting us to be all the same, even when that is sometimes hard. Okay, hold up 4 fingers for 4, and now curl them down into a fist. 4 is for justice. I spent a lot of time this week trying to think about what exactly justice means. It's harder than you might think. So this is what I came to. Justice is about how we hold power together, how we empower each other, and how we hold power to account. As UUs, we promise to strive for a beloved community and fight against oppressive power, like racism, and work for mutual and accountable empowerment of each other. Okay, 5. Hold up all 5 fingers, and now turn them into an open palm. 5 held out in front of you. 5 is for generosity, that we share, which means both giving and receiving. We promise to share ourselves, our care, our wisdom, our resources, but that we do it sustainably, not giving more than we can, and letting go of the myth of self-sufficiency to see we are all in need of each other, and we are open to the generosity of others. Okay, 6. Hold up all 5 fingers of one hand, and then another finger of the other, and take that one finger and draw a heart in the palm of the other hand. 5 is for love at the center. 6 is for love at the center, excuse me. We're working on it. Love is at the center of everything we do. Maybe some of you have seen our artwork downstairs that says, "Justice is what love looks like in public." I think that all of these values are what love looks like in public. We, as UUs, promise to put that love into action in all we do. And last 7, so hold up 5 fingers of one hand, 2 of the other. Lay that hand out flat, the one with the 5 fingers, and take those 2 fingers and go on a little journey across the palm of the other hand. Journey across those interconnecting lines in the palm of your hand. And notice how everything is connected. That everything, all those lines intersect and interconnect with each other. So 7 is for interdependence, that everything is connected, that everything we do matters to everyone else. We as UUs promise to remember this interdependence, to know we are never alone, that we can't do this alone, and that everything matters. So let's remember them one more time. Molly's going to help me with signs here. So 1, curl up that finger. 1, nation. 2, equity. 3, pluralism. 4, justice. 5, generosity. 6, love at the center. And 7, interdependence. Okay, we're going to be talking a lot about this year. I'm looking forward to learning about these values and putting these values into practice with you this year as we continue growing this faith together. Thank you.
What is at the center of your life? Imagine a glowing ball in your belly that powers you. What is it made of? This week there was one night, only one, but I'll take it, where my kids' bedtime was really sweet and free of whining and stalling. And we cuddled up in these enormous piles of stuffies in their beds, and they're still small enough that they told me about their days, and my center is made of that. It's made of the screechy bedtimes, too. And last week, I looked out at all of you as Pac played us jazz, and you each looked so beautiful and beloved, and I could feel some of the tension of the world melting off of all of us together as the piano cleared a little corner of our hearts and all our breathing synced up a little bit. And my center is made of that. And it's made of our struggles and disagreements, too. And on Monday, when it was too hot to walk in the woods and I went to the Ark, there was this young dude in a do-rag and this older white-haired guy with a sport band holding up his big glasses, and they were just standing there on the basketball court, each hugging a ball to their chests, deep in conversation. And there was this mop-headed teenager wiping down each piece of equipment so thoroughly and with such great care. And there were two women with fanny packs, fast-walking mostly so they could gossip together. And all of them were so beautiful and so different from each other and so human. And my center is made of that. It's made of our foibles and uglinesses, too. And on Thursday, I made it back to the woods, and there was this plant growing right out of the rock on the MKT. And there was a bird singing the most beautiful song, and the air had just a breath of cool in it, and my center is made of that. It's made of the mosquitoes, too, though I'd rather they find another place to buzz and bite. What I'm saying is that my center is made up of connection, that my core is a collection of what I love, even when love is hard, that my heart is woven thread by shining thread by all the relationships that form and knit me together. What is the center of your life? And what is the center of our community? And what is the center of our faith as Unitarian Universalists? This last one is the question that often confuses those of more orthodox traditions, who look around and see all of our pluralism and no Bible to be found and wonder what could be binding us together. What holds us in shared practice with all our loves and all our differences and all our free choice? What is the center of our faith? One day in 1607, a bunch of religious radicals met in a manor house in the little town of Scrooby, England, and they asked that question: what is at the center of our faith? Among them was John Robinson, a Cambridge-trained priest of the Church of England who was there out of conscience, having become convinced that no true church could be established by declaration of the state. He believed the church was to be constituted not by obedience to hierarchical authority, bishop or king, not by assent to a set of propositional statements, creed, and not by confession of transforming experience, salvation. He preached that a church was to be constituted by a promise, quote, a covenant to venture together as individuals in the way of the Spirit with entire integrity. Robinson and his radical Puritan co-religionists decided that the center of their faith should not be a creed, though belief is important, and should not be a text, though they loved the Bible, and it should not be a hierarchical authority, though they worshiped God. These radicals decided that the heart of their faith should be promise, should be relationship, should be what we still call covenant. In that manor house in 1607, individuals joined one at a time together in this covenant and thereby created a brand new church. For that act in time, they were forced to flee England for Holland, And in 1620, 100 of their congregation set sail for America and landed in Massachusetts, where they formed the first parish in Plymouth, that pilgrim church of history and legend. The first parish in Plymouth is now the oldest church in the Unitarian Universalist Association. These pilgrims are our direct religious ancestors on the Unitarian side, although we have evolved very far from those Protestant Christian origins. They are still our clear and direct ancestors, and this is no uncomplicated legacy. We inherit many of their misdeeds, most notably their genocidal treatment of the native peoples of the land. But we inherit something else from them too. Their unshakable sense of commitment, of promise, to journey together in the ways of the Spirit with the integrity of their vows to one another. That commitment is the promise that we inherit powerfully down the centuries. And although our faith has evolved a lot since those origins, that sense of commitment and promise is a bright thread that has remained the same and evolved with us through time. That bright thread that our center is connection, that our commitment and connection to others is what has always carried us along. We inherit covenant as the center of our Unitarian Universalist faith, and so doing, we inherit the sure knowledge that it is not coercion, but care that can bind us together truly. You may have heard that a few weeks ago, our Missouri Senator Josh Hawley remarked that he was a supporter of Christian nationalism and believed that the founders of this nation would have supported his desire to establish a single state religion with an orthodox and oppressive core. And I was invited to speak at a press conference opposing his remarks, and I was speaking as a representative of contemporary Unitarian Universalism with our deep religious pluralism, but I was also speaking as a direct descendant of those founders, of those original settlers, our ancestors, who explicitly created a new tradition because they believed no true church could be declared by the state, who knew in their bones that freedom of conscience in matters of faith is a prerequisite for all our other freedoms, for the liberation of our bodies and our bodily autonomy, for the freedom of our spirits, for the freedom to come together in mutual and thriving community. Those ancestors who knew, when they managed to practice it, that it is our mutual and equitable relationships with one another and the holy that sustain our faith. This freedom of conscience, this commitment to one another, and how those things intertwine, these were some of the founding principles of our nation, and they are most certainly the glowing core of our faith tradition. Freely chosen covenant is nestled in the history and the heart of our tradition. There is no creed at the center of Unitarian Universalism. There is no bishop, pope, or king. There is no single text at our core. There is instead this beating heart of promise, a commitment to all that we love, a commitment to our tangled up connections with every other living thing, a commitment to what is most ultimate in each of our lives. This heritage of promise has grown and changed over centuries as we've continued to evolve. Most creeds do not evolve, but every relationship inevitably does. And so our lineage includes, in the words of contemporary UU theologian Rebecca Parker, the sweet-spirited Universalists who rejected a notion of God as a tyrant ruling by the threat of hell and named God as a gracious, creative presence who saves all through the power of love. Those are our ancestors too. And the deep-feeling transcendentalists who insisted that religion cannot be found in the dry bones of the past, but must be discovered firsthand through our experience. Those are our ancestors too. And the Iowa sisterhood of 19th century women ordained and leading on the frontier. those are our ancestors too. And the all-embracing mystics who see truth manifest in diverse religious traditions and mysteries revealed in the trees and the stars, those are our ancestors. And humanists who dared to lift up the dignity and strength of human beings, the power and importance of critical reason in a world that prefers the abrogation of human agency and uncritical obedience to false gods, those are our ancestors too. And perhaps some of those descriptions describe some of you. We have always continued to evolve, and we always will. But amid all of that difference we've just named, we maintain a glowing core, a center for Unitarian Universalism that is promise and commitment to mutual thriving, which is to say that it is love. For what is love at its best and most faithful, but our desire for and commitment to the thriving of those we love? Since the beginnings of our tradition, we have organized ourselves around this glowing center of mutuality and relationship over creed or hierarchy. But let's be honest, that can be a hard thing to do because we are very different from each other. Perhaps you have had trouble explaining to your family or friends what Unitarian Universalism is because it's too hard to articulate. Perhaps they've asked what we believe about this or that, and you've had to respond, well, it depends on who you're talking to. Perhaps they've asked you, is this a Christian church? And the answer is that collectively it isn't, but there are definitely Christians among us, alongside Buddhist-leaning folks and Jewish folks and pagans and lots of agnostics and atheists. When relationship is what's at the center, it's hard to boil our community down to a pithy explanation. And indeed, as Unitarian Universalists have attempted to express our shared values over the decades, we have cooked up a lot of word salad. Every 20 to 40 years or so, we have updated these value statements with one clear thread linking them all articulated not as creed, but as promise of shared values, values we commit and seek to uphold in our communities. The most recent statement was adopted in the early 1980s, and it came to be called the 7 Principles. An 8th was added by some, but not all, congregations. And then, since it was always going to be an evolving tradition, and since it was always our relationships and not our value statements at the center of our faith, we updated it again, as Jamila described earlier. Although the 8 principles we've held together for many years will likely remain an important touchstone in Unitarian Universalist congregations, they are no longer in the bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association, having been replaced this year at the UUA's annual General Assembly after a 3-year democratic process with votes and amendments and study and amendments and votes and study and votes. A new covenant and values statement was adopted by the delegates from all of our congregations in an 80 to 20% vote. In the new values statement, we declare something we have long understood, that love is the center of Unitarian Universalism. And around and spiraling and tangled up with love at the center, we have named 6 additional core values: interdependence, generosity, pluralism, justice, equity, and transformation. And my favorite thing about this statement is that just as we are in mutual relationship with one another as the center of our tradition, so too are all of these values in mutual relationship with one another. From love springs all these other 6 commitments, but without those other commitments, love would not be whole. I have always said that it is a theological truth that it matters not just that we love, but how we love. And these additional values tell us something about the kind of love that Unitarian Universalists hold dear. From love springs our commitment to our interdependence as we seek to care for our deep connections. But without interdependence, love would be isolated and lonely. From love springs generosity as we are moved to share the gifts of life with one another. But without generosity, love would be scarce and guarded, limited to only a few. exclusive. From love springs pluralism because variety calls forth fresh affection. But without pluralism, love would care for only those of like mind, building walls against difference and oppressions. From love springs justice as we seek thriving for each and all whom we love. But without justice, love would be, to paraphrase Dr. King, sentimental and anemic. From love springs equity as we desire to encounter one another as equals in dignity and worth. But without equity, love is condescending and arrogant. From love springs transformation because we change each other without even trying. But without transformation, love would be airless and unchanging. Love would be a suffocation. And so it is important that these values are in relationship with one another just as we are. That they swirl and spiral in a glowing ball, that chalice flame, that light at the core of our faith. We are a people of promise who hold love at the center and who embody that love by our actions ever more widely and ever more free. We extend that promise to you, whomever you may be. What is the center of your life? Feel it glowing inside you. Bring it with you into these sheltering walls, into this circle of care. Bring your glowing core here, where we promise, where we covenant, where we strive ever onward to live up to our vow. Your center, too, will be met with love.